We're living in critical times. The world in which we live in seems to be under siege, besieged by fear, besieged by anxiety, besieged by suspicion, besieged by war and rumors of war, besieged by jingoism that passes for patriotism, besieged by uncertainty, besieged by escalating violence, instability, and despair, and above all, besieged with questions. We ask, where is the world headed today? Is war, destruction, violence the legacy of humanity? What must I do? What must we do? And will it make a difference? Where do we go from here? We are all like the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. We seem to have left home, but we seem no longer to know what our moorings are, what will give us comfort or meaning or peace. The future seems uncertain, and we seem to be living in the shadows of despair. Yet, something deep inside of me quietly yearns for a possibility that as members of the human species, we are still capable of something more than vengeance, something more than violence. Something inside me warns me that military victories often come at the cost, at the price of moral defeats. And somewhere in the depths of my being, there remains a hope that we will climb out of the despair and degradation that surrounds us today and make of the 21st century something better, something peaceful than what we have. So today is a good day to reflect on that possibility. It is a good day to remember and honor the life and the message of a man who stood for peace, who stood for nonviolence, for justice, and for the betterment of humanity, and gave his life to serve all those principles. Mahatma Gandhi. It is a good day to learn from his example and make a commitment to inculcate in our own lives some of the values that he embodied. Gandhi's biographer, Louis Fisher, once said that Gandhi's greatness lay in doing what everyone could do but doesn't. Mahatma Gandhi provided a signpost for moral and ethical living. He left invaluable insights about the way life should be oriented so as to not to become dysfunctional to the self, society, or planet. He offered us important guidelines to help us discern answers for difficult questions. For example, his 7 social sins caution us against politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without morality, education without character, pleasure without conscience, science without humanity, and worship without sacrifice. So I turn now to a more conceptual exploration of Mahatma Gandhi's relevance in the 21st century. And in doing so, I hope also to respond to the question asked by the renowned psychiatrist Erik Erikson near the beginning of his classic work, Gandhi's Truth. Erikson spoke for many, I believe, and he described what so captured his imagination by the Mahatma. Erikson's question was, what held Gandhi together and what gave him, and through him millions, a special kind of vitalizing aliveness which does not seem expendable in this world? I believe an answer to both questions, why Gandhi continues to be relevant and what gave him a vitalizing aliveness, may be addressed under 2 headings. First, his conception of religion or spirituality, and second, the way he joined ideals with action. The first point, Gandhi saw himself as a devout Hindu. He believed in the inherent divinity and dignity of every person. And as a Hindu, he believed that the world has an inherent moral order, that the cosmos is coherent, and fairness and duty make it so. He also believed that humans were morally sensible beings and could be persuaded to do what is right and what is good. And he felt that his duty, his dharma, as a Hindu was threefold: to love and to serve all humanity, because love is God, and serving humanity is serving God. Number two, to work, to strive for peace and reconciliation. And number three, to live life simply and truthfully. Now, Gandhi saw the core of the Hindu tradition to be what he called a relentless pursuit after truth, or satya. In fact, after a time, Gandhi came to say that for him, truth is God. This enabled him to include atheists and agnostics who had trouble with the notion of God in the pursuit of truth. Gandhi also had, according to Margaret Chatterjee, who's the author of the book Gandhi's Religious Thought, a sensitive ear for the demands of reason. He said, "Every true religious scripture only gains by criticism. After all, we have no other guide but our reason to tell us what may be regarded as revealed and what may not be." The early Muslims, he said, accepted Islam not because they knew it to be revealed by God to Muhammad, but because it appealed to their virgin reason. End of quote. For Gandhi, truth is to be found as the result of a person's own quest for meaning in the trial and error of daily living. This is why he subtitled his autobiography as The Story of My Experiments with Truth. Truth for Gandhi was not dogmatic but experimental, not intellectual but experiential, not theoretical but practical. As such, Gandhi followed the karma marga, or karma yoga, the Hindu religious path of action, deeds, and work. But he also recognized that truth may also come via other paths, that of knowledge, jnana yoga, devotion, bhakti yoga, or psychophysical exercise, raja yoga, according to our own personalities and gifts. Yet at the same time, truth for Gandhi, while pragmatic and individual, was by no means a fuzzy relativism like that it is seen too often today in New Age spirituality. He believed that our faculties for recognizing truth, reason, intuition, and action must be purified and refined through commitment to daily spiritual practices such as prayer, meditation, fasting, and yoga. Gandhi was also a passionate advocate of self-discipline. He himself did it in many ways. He dressed very simply and shaved his head. He did not go to concerts or movies. One whole day every week, he refrained from speaking. He did physical work a couple of hours every day. His eating was very disciplined. Not only was he a strict vegetarian, but also on each day he would take only 5 articles of food and none after sunset. He and his wife Kasturba took at the age of 36 or 37 a vow of chastity and then kept it. Now Gandhi thrived on all that discipline, but it seems rather extreme, doesn't it? Doesn't it? It is extreme. One suspects, and there is some evidence to support this, that Gandhi was naturally so inclined to excess that he needed a lot of self-discipline in order to function well. But it seems to me a saving grace that in his later years he would advise his friends not to overdo it, but instead to know themselves and their limits, and to tailor accordingly their undertakings in self-discipline. He would tell them, for instance, not to take a vow unless they were sure they could keep it. Now, Gandhi compared the need for self-discipline to the scientist's adherence to the scientific method. He said, chemists do not randomly splash liquids in a beaker, stir vigorously, and have confidence that the result will reveal scientific truth. In the same way, is it not reasonable that truth seekers hone their spiritual selves with practices that are known to facilitate genuine religious perception and provide inner strength and clarity? Now, in this regard, I learned by reading President Ichiko Niwano's book, My Father, My Teacher, that founder Nikyo Niwano was also a man of great spiritual discipline and sought to practice it all his life. My observation was later confirmed when I came across founder Niwano's commentary on chapter 13 of the Lotus Sutra, the exhortation to hold firm, that appears in the January-March 2008 edition of the Dhamma World. Now, in that chapter, founder Niwano elaborates on what it means to spare not our body and life. Founder Niwano says, and I quote, "To spare neither body nor life means being so determined to accomplish enlightenment and bring enlightenment to all others that one is prepared to sacrifice life and limb in the process. It is simplistic, however, to interpret body and life as applying to physical existence alone. The phrase also has a deeper spiritual significance. In spiritual terms," he continues, "sparing neither body nor life means abandoning the small self, that is, one's egotistical preoccupations, sacrificing the self-centered desire for ease, a comfortable life, worldly success, honor, and so on. What do we sacrifice these things for? Needless to say, we sacrifice them to gain enlightenment for ourselves, but also to spread it to everyone, to give all people real happiness, and thus bring true peace to the world." One might say that Mahatma Gandhi's commitment to spiritual discipline was very much in keeping with founder Niwano's interpretation of sparing neither body nor life. I also found during my friend Mark and my visit to Itoen near Kyoto that the founder of Itoen, Tenko-san, Tenko Nishida Sensei, was inspired by the writings of Tolstoy and Gandhi and modeled his life in a similar way by practicing a life of spiritual self-discipline. Now, related to spiritual self-discipline is Gandhi's opposition to materialism, to consumerism, the more is better concept of civilization which dominates the world today. Gandhi said, "Civilization, in the real sense of the term, consists not in the multiplication, but in the deliberate and voluntary restriction of wants. This alone," he said, "promotes real happiness and contentment." I know both Japan and the United States are two countries that struggle so much with consumerism that one even wonders if consumerism and materialism are the new commies in Japan and in the US. So this point from Gandhi is worth noting and remembering. Because according to Gandhi, the civilized person is not the one who would like to eat and drink magnificently, live in a large house, wear expensive clothes, or drive fancy cars or whatever, but finds it necessary to settle for less. Instead, a civilized person is one who has considered these matters thoughtfully and therefore chooses to live simply, sensibly, and sustainably. So, having considered Gandhi's faith and Gandhi's commitment to the pursuit of truth, self-discipline, and simple living, allow me to dwell for a bit on his philosophy of ahimsa, nonviolence. Gandhi believed deeply that ahimsa was essential to the pursuit of truth. In his words, ahimsa and truth are so intertwined that it is practically impossible to disentangle and separate them. They are like two sides of a smooth, unstamped metal disc. Who can say which is the obverse and which the reverse? Nevertheless, ahimsa is the means, truth is the end. So Gandhi's notion of ahimsa implied, besides a refusal to do physical harm, a determination not to violate another person's essence and to respect the truth that is found in another person. Gandhi recognized that violence against one's opponent and violence against oneself are inseparable. In fact, he believed that because our individual glimpses of truth are at best fragmentary, it would be truly presumptuous and somewhat arrogant to impose our particular truth fragment upon others. And this principle applies whether we be Buddhist, Shinto, Hindu, Muslim, religious liberal, or secular. Here I need to point out that Gandhi's concept and use of nonviolence was more sophisticated, less absolute, and more elaborate than many people realize. His concept of ahimsa was not a passive one, the turn your other cheek concept taken to an extreme. It was an active one. As for the elaborateness of his use of nonviolence, he would not just stage a political protest and let it go at that. People sometimes make that mistake when they try to use his method. In his most telling campaigns, Gandhi would integrate a carefully chosen, well-organized, and very well-disciplined public gesture of protest to correct a legal or social wrong. The campaign would always include from the outset a lot of peaceful communication with his opponents. He never made secret plans for a surprise, as in a war. The surprise would always be gradual and of a kind as to prompt the antagonist to reconsider their way of life. And after his followers had shown their mettle, Gandhi would then negotiate. He would warm up the friendship. He would settle for rather less concretely than had been demanded, which would be a relief to the other side. And then he would tell his own people that if they went on behaving well, then their original demands and more would in time be met in a natural and amicable way. The more modern term for this aspect of Gandhi's invention is win-win, a win-win situation. Now, just as notable as the elaborate nature of Gandhi's political work was, that his sense of moral purity went beyond ahimsa. The challenge was to refrain not only from violence, any form, but also from deception, hatred, sarcasm, and any extraneous pressure on the opponent. So what you see in all of this is a pragmatic, critical, and compassionate mind at work. So Gandhi's first gift to all of us, and the one special source of his aliveness, is his approach to religion as the pursuit of truth, a truth that is individual, experimental, experiential, and partial. And because our individual glimpses of truth are incomplete and tentative, truth may only be pursued through the means of ahimsa or the non-violent respect for the divine essence and the truth of other persons. Our inherent Buddha nature. Now, Gandhi's second prophetic gift to us is his blending of ideals and actions. This is most clearly reflected in Satyagraha, which he variously translated as soul force, truth force, or love force. He developed this method of nonviolent resolution of conflict over the course of his 20 years in South Africa and refined it in hundreds of campaigns in India. It was never fully captured in a word formula, but rather realized in practice. Behind Satyagraha was Gandhi's position, virtually unique among modern political thinkers, that the end can never justify the means. Instead, Gandhi saw that means were really ends in the making or ends in process. He gave examples of what this meant. If one wishes to cross the ocean to visit family, one must use a boat, not a bullock cart. Using the wrong vessel or means will result in a drowning, not a reunion. Similarly, one cannot get a rose by planting a poisonous weed. So if one sows violence, one will only reap the same. Thus, a seeker of truth will not permit himself or herself or others to use foul means with the illusory justification that their continuation for a little while longer will end in a peaceful future. Now, the method of Satyagraha is not perfect. It does not always work. Each time, it must be tailored carefully to the immediate context, and we need to refine Gandhi's Satyagraha for use in the 21st century. But surely that task deserves as much effort, hopefully more than the enormous resources that we continue to spend in ever greater refinements to the techniques and technology of violence and war. And what we can say is Gandhi's challenge to us, those of us living most comfortably in a postmodern world. I believe these words from Margaret Chatterjee make a fine start. She writes, "For Gandhi, what is wrong with us is not the inadequacy of our concepts, although they are, heaven knows, inadequate enough. But what is wrong with us, according to Gandhi, is the weakness of our imagination, our inability to put ourselves in other people's shoes, the smallness of our hearts, and our unwillingness to translate our beliefs into practice." I do not think it can be said any better than that. So how might we create and achieve those ends? The strengthening of imagination, the enlargement of our hearts, and the discovery of courage needed to put our beliefs into practice. Gandhi's answer to that, I believe, is simple. It is to pursue truth, commit firmly to nonviolence, search earnestly for ways to resolve conflict, focus the spotlight of attention on the growth of our own souls, and above all, to help others. And this we must do with all the heart, with all the soul that we can muster. Thank you for listening.